What's going on YouTube? My name is Eric Sun and I'm a photographer based out of Atlanta, Georgia. And let's talk about memory cards. Memory cards are things that we don't normally think about often or that we have a lot of conversation and dialogue about, but I feel like memory cards are super essential for any digital content creator. Any photographer, videographer that uses a digital camera, I feel like that memory cards are probably one of the most essential accessories that you need to get and to kind of know about to be able to use your cameras to their fullest potential, right? Because there are so many different types of memory cards, there's so many different types of read and write speeds, there's so many different types of shapes and like what the cards can do. And knowing what your camera can do and knowing the proper memory card to get for your camera, I feel like is super important for you to be able to use everything that your camera comes with, right? Camera manufacturers like to market, oh, this camera can shoot this many frames per second. It can shoot this video resolution with this many frames per second. It can do all these things. But if your memory card cannot keep up with your camera, then you're not going to really be able to use your camera in the way that they advertise it and what you spent good money on to be able to do, right? To provide those products and those services to your clients. So without further ado, I'm going to break it down and I'm going to talk generally about memory cards, what I look for when I shop for memory cards, and the memory cards that I use in the cameras that I own. So let's get started. All right, and the first camera that I want to talk about and the memory cards that I use in it, it is this camera right here. It is the 5D Mark IV, and this is the first full frame camera that I've ever owned that I got. I've had this for a few years now. It is still by far one of my favorite DSLRs that I've ever used and that I own. I would definitely still recommend it. I have a video on my channel talking about if I feel like the 5D Mark IV is still worth it in today's day and age with all these new cameras coming out. My answer is still a passionate yes. This is an amazing camera. I still use this camera all the time. But one of the great things about this camera is that it has two memory cards. And you can see that right there, that it has a CompactFlash and an SD card that can both fit in this camera. And here's the CompactFlash. And here is the SD card, which I feel like is one of the most common memory cards that we know of today. I feel like SD cards are so common that, you know, sometimes even computers have a built-in SD card reader in them, whereas CompactFlash cards, they're not really that common, and so I don't really know of any computer that has a built-in CompactFlash card reader. But the beautiful thing about having dual cards is that in the camera itself is that you can actually have an automatic backup whenever you're at a shoot. So I know a lot of event photographers use this, wedding photographers, and some sport photographers even use this, where they have dual memory cards to where you can keep shooting, having one, and you'll automatically have, your camera will automatically copy all the footage that you're capturing to a second card. So I use my CompactFlash as my card one, is my main card that I always read and write, that I always write to, and the SD card is always secondary, and I'll get a little bit more into that later. But as you can see with 256 and 128, these things, that is enough memory that I've never really had to use more memory than that, and this is more than enough memory for basically 90% of the shoots that I'm at. The only times where this is not enough is when I'm shooting video, and again, I'll get into a little bit more of that later. But sometimes during events, another great thing is that I've shot events where I've had to turn around the photos during the event. So I know some wedding photographers do this, where after the reception or after the ceremony, before the reception, there's a little slideshow on like a tablet where it kind of goes through some of the photos of the ceremony. And I've actually shot some events, corporate events, where the point of contact will come up to me and say, hey, can we have some photos, you know, after you take the first half, can we have some photos so we can use it for our slideshow at the end of the event and also for social media? And so what I would have to do is that I'll record both cards and I'll give this SD card over to my teammate so that they can edit and they can turn them in and submit them to the client so that they can have them during the event. And so I can continue shooting with the CompactFlash card. And the biggest differences between these two cards is not just the size and the shape of them, because one is 256, another one is 128, but it's also the read and write speeds of these. And so for the 5D Mark IV, like I said, you kind of need to know a little bit about what your camera can do, which will help explain the different types of memory cards that you should look for when you're buying them. But the 5D Mark IV, it shoots you know, again, it's a full frame. I always shoot in RAW. I never shoot in JPEG, but it also shoots in 4K 30. And the SD card actually could not keep up with filming in 4K 30. So if you can see on here, the CompactFlash card right here, I don't know if you'll be able to see, but 256, it can record at 160 megabytes per second, whereas this SD card is a little small, but it can film at 150 megabytes per second. And so those 10 megabytes are a huge difference in terms of the read and write speed of these cards, which is also something that I look for when I shop for memory cards. But that is a big difference on being able to continue a shoot without having my camera having to buffer. So basically what the buffering is, or what the lag is with the camera and the memory cards, if the camera cannot write to the memory card fast enough, then there is this buffer time. Like if you're shooting high speed continuous on the camera, you're shooting RAW, and while you're shooting multiple frames per second, it does have a countdown of how many more images you can take before you need to wait for the camera to continue writing all of that information, all those images in video to the memory card. So if the card is not fast enough, then it's going to kind of backlog and it's going to kind of slow down and need to have that buffering time for you to continue shooting, because it needs that time to write all that data onto the card so that you'll have it. But for the CompactFlash card, the read and write speed of that card is fast enough to where it does not require the camera, like the camera is able to write to the card fast enough so that it doesn't require a buffer time, that you can just keep shooting and shooting and shooting and not having a delay or having to pause your shoot because of the limits of your cards. And so that is the biggest difference between those two cards in my experience of what I've used in the 5D Mark IV. Now, if you're not shooting video, if I'm not shooting video, the SD card works fine. As long as I'm not shooting anything fast, I can just take my time. Like if I'm doing like a modeling shoot or a portrait shoot, I can take my time and shoot, and I don't need to kind of shoot rapidly. But if I need to do something like higher fast paced, or I'm shooting video, I always record to the CompactFlash just because it is faster and I don't have to deal with that buffering time. Like on a shoot, I don't want my camera to, or my memory cards to dictate how the flow of the shoot is going to go, and I don't want my equipment to limit me in terms of my creativity and like what I want to do during a shoot. I want to be in full control of the shoot itself and not having my equipment limit and tell me when I need to take a break or when I need to pause, so that the camera can kind of keep up with the pace of the shoot. But those are the selling points of the 5D Mark IV, that it can shoot 4K 30, it has a dual card reader in here, and also it can shoot so many frames per second photo wise that for me to be able to use this camera to its fullest potential, I would need a CompactFlash and an SD card. All right, and the next camera that I'm going to talk about in its memory cards is this camera right here. It is the 1DX Mark II. This is a beast of a camera, as you can tell, just because of the size. It has a dual grip system on here, and it also has a dual memory card system for this. And the 1DX Mark II, to give you a little bit more information about the camera itself, is that this camera is known to be geared and marketed towards photographers that shoot things that are really fast paced, like sports, races, even some wildlife. If you're shooting some action shots or anything like that, the 1DX Mark II is definitely known to be a lot faster, and it is a lot faster than the 5D Mark IV. And I'll do a little demonstration about that in a little bit. But the 1DX Mark II, it can shoot 4K 60, whereas the 5D Mark IV's video limit is 4K 30. And so because of that, and because this camera is a lot faster and it can shoot 4K 60, the memory cards need to be a little beefier. And so with that, it has a dual memory card system as well, as you can see here. And it has a CompactFlash like it does in the 5D Mark IV, which is this card. And it also has a new card that is the CFast 2.0 card right here. And this card, you can see that it is a little bit newer, it looks newer, and this is the main card that I shoot with on the 1DX Mark II. And that's mostly because of the differences of the read and write speeds of the CompactFlash and the 2.0, CFast 2.0, which is right here, whereas the CompactFlash, it shoots in 160 megabytes per second, whereas the CFast 2.0 shoots 525 megabytes per second. So that jump in and of itself is a huge jump in terms of how fast that these cards are. And again, it's similar concept, right? The 1DX Mark II advertises that it can shoot so many frames per second. It can shoot 4K 30. The 1DX Mark II also shoots an MPEG video codec, which are just huge video files. And so for you to be able to read and write fast enough from the camera to the card itself, for you to not have that buffer or that stalling period in your camera, is having cards that are fast enough. And so the CFast 2.0 card is my main card, whereas the CompactFlash is my secondary card and my backup card that I have in the camera. So with the demonstration between the speed of the 1DX Mark II and the 5D Mark IV, is that I'm going to demonstrate that right now just by the number of frames per second that you can shoot. Let me just change these settings real quick to high speed continuous. So this is the 1DX Mark II and how fast that you can take images. So that you can hear is super quick, and this is the 5D Mark IV. So you can hear that, you can actually hear the mirror going up and down in the 5D Mark IV, but the 1DX Mark II is just extremely faster. I mean, it's like the chances of you missing the shot is significantly less than if you're shooting with the 5D Mark IV, if you're shooting in a really fast-paced environment. But again, the reason why I have the 1DX Mark II is because it shoots in 4K 30, and that is a service that I would like to provide to some of my clients, and just having that quality and being able to slow down that footage and all of that good stuff, right? Now the last camera that I want to talk about is the one I'm actually filming with. It is the Canon R5. It is a mirrorless camera, and I'm sure with it being one of the newer cameras, a lot of people know the features and the capabilities that this camera has. It is a super powerful camera. It can shoot in electronic shutter, which is even more frames per second while shooting photos, and also can shoot 8K RAW, and you can downsize that. You can shoot 4K in slow motion, which is 120 frames per second. And for the R5, for you to be able to utilize that camera to its fullest potential, you need even different cards. But one thing to note is that the video codec on the R5 is different. It is no longer MPEGs as it was with the two DSLRs, the 5D Mark IV or the 1DX Mark II. It is different, so that is so much better. The video files are not as big just because of its codec, depending on what you're shooting in. But the R5 does have a dual card system as well, and this is the CFXpress Type B, which is the newest card, and it also holds an SD card, which we've seen in the 5D Mark IV. And both of these cards are used in the R5, and again, I don't use the SD card as my primary card. I use this CFXpress Type B. So I don't know if you can see, but the read and write speed of this card is 1750 megabytes per second, whereas the SD card is still 150 megabytes per second. So even that jump from the SD card to the CFast 2.0 to the CFXpress Type B, the CFast 2.0 is 525 megabytes per second, the CFXpress Type B is 1750 megabytes per second. So that jump in and of itself is huge as well. And so these are the cards that I use with these cameras, and it's mostly so that I just can't emphasize this enough, to have memory cards that enable you to be able to use your camera to its fullest potential. And so I'm also going to be doing like a little speed test where I'll kind of show you, like I had a shoot earlier today where I dumped all the footage that I shot. It was like 161 raw images that I shot. I put it on all of these different cards, and then I'm transferring all of these cards to my computer. So I'll do a speed test for you there, just to kind of show you how fast these cards can be and the differences between each card, so that when you buy cards for your camera, you'll actually kind of have an idea of the read and write speeds that you may want, and also the kind of write speeds that you'll get when you're kind of dumping all the footage from your card to your computer, because that's time that you're using up to, where you're just sitting around kind of waiting for you to be able to start editing. And yeah, so let's dive into it and let's do the speed test. So here you can see that I've created folders for each different type of card, so that you can know, like when I'm transferring cards over, transferring the footage over to those certain cards, what card it is, and also, you know, how fast it'll take. So again, 161 raw images, 6.01 gigs. This is the CompactFlash card that is in the 5D Mark IV and the 1DX Mark II. And I'm also gonna kind of fast forward a little bit of the transferring time so you don't have to sit through it all. But with the CFast card, it took 46.62 seconds to transfer all of these images from the card to my computer. And the next card that's up is the CFast 2.0 that's in the 1DX Mark II. And as I'm transferring all of these over from the card onto my computer, the CFast card took 21.25 seconds. So that's almost half, or that is about half of how long that the CompactFlash card took. All right, and the next card that's up is the CFXpress Type B. This is the newest card. It is the one that I use on my R5. That reads and writes at 1750 megabytes per second. Dropping this down to transfer all these images from the memory card to my computer, it took 18.03 seconds, which is a lot faster than all the others. Granted, 3 seconds may not seem like that big of a difference between the CFast 2.0 and the CFXpress Type B, but it is in transferring all this data. I feel like that it is a lot faster, and you can feel the difference also when you're transferring video. Now for the last and final card that I use, it is the SD card. This is transferring all these photos again, 161 photos at 6.01 gigs. The SD card came in at 45.53 seconds. Now, I was surprised about the results, honestly, because I don't know if you guys picked up on it, but the SD card actually was faster than the CompactFlash card, and I was gonna test it again, but then I was like, I'm just gonna kind of leave it as this because this is a reality of what happened when I was transferring all these cards to my computer. And I was transferring it one by one. I didn't have all these cards plugged in at the same time and just transferring, one at a time. I actually had one card plugged in my computer at a time. And my memory card readers. And so the SD card was actually faster than the CompactFlash card for whatever reason. But I'm actually just gonna let that be, because that is just the reality of it, which kind of goes against what I was saying. But the cards, the CompactFlash cards are faster than the SD cards mostly. And I know mostly because when I'm shooting video, especially 4K 30 on the 5D Mark IV, I've never had an issue with the buffer time with the CompactFlash card, but with the SD card, after maybe 3 seconds of filming, I always run into that where it requires a buffer time, and it automatically stops recording. All right, so that's a little brief overview of just these cards and the cards that I use with the cameras that I own, why there's so many different types of cards. It is kind of annoying having to buy so many different cards, especially because when you buy a newer camera, or a better camera, I should say, too, that the cards are more expensive. So you're investing a lot of money in these memory cards, and I personally would have probably preferred to have invested this much money in maybe like another lens or a CPL filter or like other things, other accessories. But memory cards are essential, and having reliable memory cards are super important for your workflow and just for your gear and for you to be able to be a great shooter. I will say that I am a Lexar guy. All my memory cards, as you've seen, are all Lexars, and I guess in this instance I am very brand loyal, mostly because I've had other memory cards in the past from different brands, and sooner or later I've always had a memory card kind of fail on me, where on the shoot itself the memory card started acting up to where it wouldn't properly write the images to the card, or the card will get corrupted, and I will lose all the files. And even trying with third-party recovery softwares, the most that I would get is just the really compressed JPEG thumbnails that are in those raw images. And basically all that is that when you look up your images on your computer and you're searching through them really quick, your computer will pull up just the thumbnail image to kind of tell you what that picture is, but doesn't pull up the full image. So it just makes the process a lot faster for you to be able to search through your images, especially with the files being so big. But that to me is just not good enough, right? I mean, I kind of do demand, I guess, perfection when it comes to my memory cards, because I depend so much on them, right? Like without good and reliable memory cards, having to make that phone call to your client saying, hey, my memory card's failed. I don't know what happened. I'm really sorry. Here's all your money back. It's one of the worst conversations to have, and especially if you're shooting like a wedding or something where you can't ever redo that event. You know, you can't redo like most events, but just that, with it being so significant and such a special day to your couple, having a memory card fail is just, it's one of the worst things ever. So investing in good memory cards is something that I would always be willing to spend money on. There are cheaper options of these cards that aren't Lexar. There are different brands. You can try them out, and some people, though, they have worked really well. But for me, because I've just ran into so many issues, I've been traumatized. I only stick with Lexars, and I've never had a problem with them. And in talking about the issues that I've had with memory cards, being able to take care of your memory cards is also super important. Making sure that you have memory card cases that you can put your cards in when they're not in the camera, but also reformatting them every once in a while will keep the integrity of the card last longer. I do know that when you do reformat them, make sure you format them in your camera so that they are formatted for your camera specifically and what you're using them for. So all of my main cards that I use on my cameras are all 256. Except my R5. My R5 is, I believe, is 512 gigabytes. But all of my main cards are 256. My secondary cards are all 128. And that's just how I distinguish between the two in terms of my primary and secondary, and also cheaper, smaller capacity cards are also cheaper. So I throw a lot of money on the primary card, and then for the secondary card, I cheapen out just a little bit and I downsize on the space. But it has worked perfectly fine for me. I've never had an issue with running out of space, except when I'm shooting on my DSLRs, video on DSLRs. But with the R5 now, I've never had that issue at all. Oh, and also before I forget, while you're buying a new camera, definitely keep in mind the memory cards that you have to buy for that camera to be able to use your camera to its fullest potential. But also another essential piece, an accessory for the memory cards, is a memory card reader. Now I have 3 different types of memory card readers. One of them is kind of a hub where it can read 3 cards in it. The other one is for my CFast 2.0, and the other one is for my CFXpress Type B. Now the memory card hub reader that I have that can read 3 different types of cards. It can read micro SDs, SDs, and CompactFlash. And so the card readers also are relatively not that expensive, but it is just an extra thing that you would just have to budget to make sure that you can buy a card reader, so that when you buy a new camera and you have to get these new cards, you're able to read them and transfer the data from the card to your computer. So I wanted to say that as well. So just keep that in mind, that when you buy memory cards, you also have to make sure they buy a memory card reader. So yeah, so that's the brief overview of it. I hope this was helpful and insightful, and I hope that it helps you determine and just remember that when you buy a new camera, there are other accessories that you need to buy, and memory cards are definitely one of them. Don't skip out on them. Definitely invest in good memory cards, because it will be worth it. You will be able to sleep better at night, because after you've made that horrible phone call once, you know that you never want to go through that again, or put anyone else through that ever again. So yeah, let me know what you think. Let me know what brand of memory cards that you shoot with, if you had any issues with any cards, and if you're willing to share a horror story of a memory card of when it failed on you, definitely please share that. I'm sure a lot of us will really enjoy reading your horror story. But yeah, thanks so much for watching, guys. Again, please leave a comment if you have any questions. I try to answer all the questions and respond to all comments as much as possible. And please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see y'all in the next video. Peace.